and let us all do we can to build a better future. Tulsi Gabbard versus Kamala Harris. I found a couple of these clips here, and I just find it funny. I just find it funny just how desperate K-Hive is to try and prop up this image of Kamala Harris. And once again, Tulsi Gabbard kind of gives a 1-2 punch to Kamala. Okay. Kamala's approval rating is in the dumps. She is not popular. And there's been many reports in regards towards her standing in the administration, where Joe Biden was saying he was disappointed in Kamala's performance. We have seen Kamala fail at a lot of things. And I truly do wish that we see more stuff like this, because everyone seems to have forgotten Kamala Harris's track record. But I want to play this video first, because it really says a lot about Kamala's, mental well-being. And Tulsi is just absolutely brutal with it.
I think the Democratic machine, their play is for them to be able to stay in power. They need Joe Biden to run for re-election, get reelected, so that when he gets to that point where he cannot function, which will likely happen sooner than later, they will then install their puppet, their chosen one, Kamala Harris, to become the unelected president of the United States. And then she runs again in 2028 with the power of the incumbency. They want someone that they can control, and they can control Kamala Harris.
Why do you believe that?
I have no doubt about it. You look at how she carries herself. You look at her inability to form coherent sentences. Which
Can you explain the mystery of the ages? Can you explain the uncontrollable giggling?
Yes, I can actually.
What is it?
To me, it shows nervousness, anxiety, and fear.
Wow.
That's
nervousness, anxiety, and fear. So let's have democracy in the chat here. Type 1 if you think Tulsi Gabbard's assessment is correct in regards towards, Kamala Harris being nervous. She laughs all the time. At inappropriate times, too. We saw this happen throughout the 2020 primary and throughout Biden's administration. Always laughing, always giggling, always looking uncomfortable, trying to break the ice, trying to relate to people. Perhaps maybe the job is far more difficult for Kamala than she realizes. Type 2 if you think, oh, no, Tulsi Gabbard's just wrong. Kamala's just a barrel full of laughs. Kamala can do the job, Kit. But let's also look at another thing, too. And especially when it comes down to being qualified as commander-in-chief, because let's face it, Biden is a very old individual. And should anything happen to Joe Biden, Kamala is next in line. Is she truly qualified to be commander-in-chief? Is she truly qualified to lead this nation? And the answer is, unfortunately, no. No.
Just talk of freedom. But it seems like under this administration, and we've seen even documents to see how they've tried to pressure social media companies to basically keep us from being able to have the right to free speech. So there's no freedom for people who have a counter view. You only have freedom in this under this administration's view of the First Amendment if you agree with their talking points.
Jordan, it's good to see you. And I thought the same thing when I saw that video, when I found that the DNC was not going to allow for any presidential primary debates for voters to be able to actually question and examine President Biden's record and compare and contrast it with others who are running. They talk about freedom, they talk about democracy, they talk about rights. But as you said, we are only free to speak if they find our speech acceptable. We can only examine facts and information and truth if they deem those things to be acceptable, and truth and facts and information. There are so many different issues here that we could go down the list on, and we would find on just about all of them how the Biden administration is failing to meet that mark of actually upholding our God-given rights and freedoms enshrined in the Constitution and Bill of Rights. So to me, hearing his message was actually quite insulting, given how they are directly trying to undermine our freedoms at every turn.
Now, again, let's speak about freedoms, especially freedom of speech, and in regards towards World Press Freedom Day. This administration the Biden-Harris administration is doing everything it can to extradite Julian Assange here to the United States. Now, again, Julian Assange is a journalist. He is a reporter. He's supposed to give out facts and information. And he was exposing crime and corruption, especially when the theaters in Afghanistan and Iraq. And this administration is going after him. So when the Biden-Harris administration say they care about press freedom or individual freedom, I say proof. Where's your proof? Where's your evidence? Where is it? Because I don't see it. I've been seeing under this administration a massive wave of censorship and suppression. Under these 4 years under Joe Biden, Hard Lens Media has received not 1, but 8 strikes by YouTube because of, let's face it, the policies that are being implemented by the establishment and the powers that be. This is the most it's ever happened. Now, yes, things were a little rough in the Trump era, but it was never this bad. Hell, all independent media, all free thinkers are struggling. We're just seeing how vast the censorship machine truly is. And this is happening under a Democratic administration.
Yeah, and the rest of the message just ignored all of the crises they've created around the world, which are just a mess and they affect us all here domestically. You brought up, I wanted to ask you about that specifically because you ran for president in the Democrat primary in 2020. And so you've seen this process. But the DNC has said it is not whether or not they can force Joe Biden to go to a debate. He can decide that, but they're not even going to hold debates, even though somewhat unexpectedly for, I guess, some inside the Democrat Party, you have a couple of candidates who announced RFK Jr., who's polling at, in some polls, 21% of the vote, Democrat primary vote. Marianne Williamson back at 9% in some of these polls. You got 30% of Democrats saying they are not in these polls right now, that they would vote for someone else in the Democrat primary. And yet, again, this kind of idea, we saw it yesterday in the press conference, Tulsi, when he's got the card and it's got the question, it's got the answer. He knows everything. So there's no actual, the press isn't holding him accountable at all. Even when it looks like they have an opportunity to ask him a question, they are literally all just actors with a script. And that to me is just very scary as an American.
Oh, buddy, you're just figuring this out right now. That's how it's always been for a long time there, baby. That's how it's always been. That's how the system is always set up. Hell, I think maybe there might be a script where Kamala has to laugh and she's trying to deliver that laughter line and it just doesn't work.
It's scary, Jordan, and it's incredibly offensive because it really reveals what Joe Biden and his administration and his kind of whole cabal of the Washington, the permanent Washington, which includes the mainstream media, which includes their friends in big tech and social media, which includes their friends in the national security state, all of whom have a vested interest in Joe Biden getting elected, not because they think he's some great, fantastic leader who's going to save this country, but because him remaining in power allows them to maintain their power. So it's an insult to voters that they're not willing to allow us to be able to question and examine him and his record. It's an insult to voters when you look at how blatantly they are rigging the system. We talked a little bit earlier about how they did it a little more subtly when I ran for president Democratic primary.
Oh, Tulsi. No, they didn't. They didn't do it subtly. Come on. Tulsi. No. Come on. It was out there. Blatantly out there. It was out there. Come on, Tulsi. Tulsi, you're being too nice. What's wrong with you? You know what they did.
In 2020, it's just blatant now. They're just saying, nope, we will not allow this democracy to work as it should by having our candidates debate. We're giving you one choice and one choice only, and that is Joe Biden. But then that leads to the next step, which is Joe Biden. If Joe Biden gets reelected, what happens next? Very quickly, I can imagine we will see a Vice President Kamala Harris become President Kamala Harris, and she becomes the next puppet for the permanent Washington to be able to control.
Now, let's be very clear here about Kamala, all right? If we all just look back in time in 2020, oh boy, was she hyped up. She made her announcement on Martin Luther King Day in the 2020 Democratic primary. She had all this fanfare. Everyone was excited for her, and she got destroyed twice in the debates. and her campaign went belly up. Now, of course, all the vote blue, no matter who sycophants will be like, but she's the vice president now, Kit, so who cares? Well, she's still not popular. Her approval rating is downright disastrous. She is unable to relate to people. And here's the thing. If she does become president to succeed Joe Biden, the establishment will do everything they can to try and legitimize her, because here's a very disturbing fact. And this is an ideal scenario for the Democratic establishment, not an ideal scenario for all of you watching. Okay, Kamala becomes president. She's filling in for Joe Biden's remainder years as president. She could then run for her first term. And oh no, God forbid, she could run for a second term. That's right. Because technically she's only filling in for Joe Biden's term if Joe Biden is unable to lead. So that means we could have not 8 years, but maybe, dare I say it, 10 years, 12 years of Kamala being president of the United States, our second imperial president. The only other person to rule over this country past 8 years is FDR. Now, to be fair, he only ruled for 12 years. He died in his fourth term, an unprecedented 16 years altogether. That's not good. It opens up a little can of worms that I don't think we could ever put away if we have an imperial president.
And I think she's demonstrated that she would be, people talk about Joe Biden's age incompetency, but when we see Vice President Harris, she doesn't, I'm not real confident in anything she has to say. In fact, most of the time when she's speaking, I have a tough time, even when it's kind of a gimme speech in front of supporters, figuring out what she's even trying to say. But I think what you said is that combined issue is that Washington, the establishment there, all of those different elements of it, not just the political parties, but also the media, the corporate interest, they're okay now with having leaders like that who aren't bold, who can't answer questions, who don't speak and kind of inspire Americans, but instead just kind of mumble along, but put in the people that they want and go along with the policies that they're asking for without question.
You're right.
That's true, buddy. I mean, come on. But the Republican Party is guilty of that too. Okay. Both parties do that. Both parties do that. And the thing is, Kamala has a hard time really relating to people. And the thing is, I'm glad that Tulsi Gabbard is calling them out. Now, look, I want to play this one final video as well. And it has to deal with how the debates are going to be, well, implemented. Now, the DNC has made it very clear there will be no debates. But as time continues to press on, I am very confident in saying that both RFK Jr. and Marianne Williamson's numbers will continue to rise up. And the DNC is going to be in a very interesting and precarious position because, yes, we saw them commit election fraud in 2016 and 2020, if you've been paying attention to politics. A lot of Americans are still somewhat shocked or don't even know that it took place in the 2020 and 2016 Democratic primaries. The thing is, though, as the numbers continue to rise up, Americans are going to wonder, well, gee, if corporate media is saying that Biden is so great, why doesn't he debate RFK Jr. and Marianne Williamson? These numbers keep on going up. Biden's numbers keep on going down. What's going on? Now, again, to be clear here, the establishment likes to put its weight on the scales in regards towards how candidates are viewed. But you can only keep on hiding a fraud candidate for so long. You only can keep on pretending that the emperor is not wearing any clothes until you realize, hey, your imperial majesty, you're naked. So Tulsi Gabbard here adds in a conversation and a talk about in regards towards how the debates were rigged and how the establishment wants to pick their candidates. We've seen this before. We've seen it happen so many times. It's a sad state of affairs when nothing still fundamentally changes. So let's play this video.
There are so many issues here. You've mentioned a couple of them. There are many, many more. We could go down the list of his indefensible record that he's had as president. One of the things, though, is that the American people need to be able to examine these issues. What's the traditional way that we normally do that? Through a debate, right? Well, the DNC just announced we're not going to have any presidential primary debates. And so, you know, for me as a presidential candidate back in 2020, they were rigging the system back then. They were just more subtle about it, tossing softball questions to Kamala Harris and giving people more time. But now they are so arrogant and so disrespectful to the American people and voters. They're just saying, nope, we're not going to allow any debates. We're not going to put his record in front of the American people. We're not going to give people any choice other than Joe Biden. And so my appeal to Democrats and to American voters, if people are thinking about voting for President Biden, they really need to ask themselves if they want to support a candidate that has so much disdain and disrespect for the American people.
Again, what Tulsi is saying, very true, on the point. But again, Tulsi, the American people have been successfully brainwashed by the two-party system and corporate media. So a lot of Americans, like lemmings, will continue to go along with it. The purpose of this show and the purpose of what we'll be doing these next couple of months and going into the 2024 election cycle is this: to give a detailed analysis of just how screwed up the DNC and RNC are, how screwed up the entire process is, and why we have to break away from electoral politics, why we need to start building movements and organizations not connected to Washington, D.C., why we need to start supporting citizen ballot initiatives and third-party candidates. We have to start being better. Now, Kamala Harris, failed candidate, failed politician. It's really interesting to see just how the establishment is not only trying to do everything it can to put a shield wall around Biden, but also around Harris, his supposed successor. Things aren't looking too good for the Democrats. But in regards to criticism, I guess Kamala Harris can only say one thing, and that's, do not come my direction with criticism. I cannot take criticism whatsoever. To which then I have to say, well, good luck in telling you not to come.
Do not come. Do not come.
I'm going to come.
Yes!
I can't help it. I'm a bad guy. What more do you want from me?